In this video, I'm going to give you revelations about foreign spies that attempted to uncover what the United States knows about the UFO phenomena. I'm also going to share with you some of the struggles that Luis Elizondo endured to help us all passage into a post-disclosure world. In other words, it's about to get lit. On the October 9th Dark Matters radio program, host Don Ecker asked George Knapp the following question. What was it that you learned in D.C. that blew your mind? Here's one sentiment Knapp shared. Knapp basically said that foreign spies had been on the ground in the Uinta Basin, where Skinwalker Ranch is located, observing the U.S. operatives who were studying the paranormal phenomena in order to figure it out. Knapp also explains there had been an overt act of espionage that was unleashed by a foreign government targeting, I believe, Skinwalker Ranch findings and ATIP findings. Knapp can't say where this took place, but the activities were caught and surveillance equipment was uncovered at a very sensitive location. Knapp goes on to explain that the fact that these other world powers were so actively trying to figure out what the U.S. knew in regards to the findings at Skinwalker Ranch, and I think ATIP as well, fits in with some other information he was given by insiders. And that is that they have direct indications that at least one of those countries that was spying on U.S.-sponsored investigations in the Uinta Basin has some technology that is operational, and its development was at least partly accomplished through studying the phenomena. Knapp said, what they have is not a flying saucer, but he seemed to indicate that whatever it is, it's a huge technological advancement. The host then asked Knapp, are you referring to either the Russians or Chinese? Knapp said yes and went on to explain. Quote, there have been some really provocative acts on the part of the Russians. For example, where they fly real close to our warships and then just almost beg us to take action against them. I think they've been emboldened by some things that they've figured out based on this kind of research. It was revealed in a recent Phenomenon Radio interview that George Knapp, as a result of talking with Elizondo, has gotten the sense that Secretary of Defense James Mattis was totally unaware of the ATIP program. Elizondo's resignation letter seems to indicate this as well. Bear in mind that the Secretary of Defense is the leader and chief executive officer of the U.S. Department of Defense. The Department of Defense is the executive department of the Armed Forces of the United States. Frankly, if Secretary of Defense Mattis was unaware of ATIP and the ongoing anomalous vehicle incursions into sensitive military airspace, that is 100% unacceptable. Elizondo told George Knapp that his immediate supervisor did not know he was assigned to ATIP or that ATIP even existed. The person above Elizondo's immediate superior was aware of ATIP, and he was the one overseeing Lou in regards to ATIP. Very strangely, it was the person immediately above Elizondo that wasn't aware of ATIP that was tasked to report to the Secretary of Defense, James Mattis. Now, when Elizondo sent his resignation letter in, he sent it to the superior 2 steps above him, intending it to get to Secretary Mattis. But it never got there because his supervisor 2 steps above was not the one that reports to Secretary Mattis. As already explained, it's the superior in between that did. The following is a quote by George Knapp from a Phenomenon Radio interview that explains how Secretary of Defense James Mattis found out about Luis Elizondo's resignation letter. It didn't get to Mattis until the night before the New York Times story broke. Mattis was at a social event, that's my understanding of how it went, and someone pulled him aside and said this story is going to break in the New York Times tomorrow, and Lou Elizondo is going to be quoted after having worked in this program, and here's the letter he wrote that explains the reasons for his resignation, and I guess Mattis was dumbfounded. He was at that point unaware. I think Lou had indicated that he thought that maybe Mattis had been insulated from this program, ATIP. What was going on? Sort of like plausible deniability, need-to-know basis. Now, I can't even begin to tell you how livid this makes me. The idea that there may be powerful interests within the Pentagon that would ensure that Secretary of Defense James Mattis, the #1 guy in the Department of Defense, would be barred from having knowledge of ATIP and its findings is beyond ridiculous. If anyone deserves a say in how the United States should deal with the UAP presence, Secretary Mattis does. In fact, this is what Luis Elizondo had to say about Secretary Mattis's capacity to change the way the Pentagon deals with the UAP presence on our planet. The following is from a Giuliano Milinkovic interview.
My familiarity with him, Secretary Mattis has always been a man who wants more information, not less. And if anybody could break down those silos and stovepipes, he was a man who could do it. Believe me, I've seen that man in combat. If there is one man who can change the system for the good, it is him.
I'm going to be very frank with you right now. I hope that Secretary Mattis, having been insulated from the ATIP program, is not true in some kind of cover story. Because if it is true that the Secretary of Defense was insulated from ATIP, then I just give up. I'm going to read to you the resignation letter that the former director of ATIP, Luis Elizondo, wrote. It should be noted that Twitter user @J097844691 is the one that discovered Elizondo's resignation letter. Subject: Letter of Resignation and Deferred Retirement. Mr. Secretary, it has been my sincere honor and pleasure to have served with some of America's finest men and women in both peacetime and in war. For over 22 years, I have been blessed to learn from and work with world-class leadership, you certainly being among the very best. With that in mind, bureaucratic challenges and inflexible mindsets continue to plague the department at all levels. This is particularly true regarding the controversial topic of anomalous aerospace threats. Despite overwhelming evidence at both the unclassified and classified levels, certain individuals in the department remain staunchly opposed to further research on what could be a tactical threat to our pilots, sailors, and soldiers, and perhaps even an existential threat to our national security. In many instances, there seems to be a direct correlation the phenomena exhibits with respect to our nuclear and military capabilities. The department must take serious the many accounts by the Navy and other services of unusual aerial systems interfering with military weapon platforms and displaying beyond next-generation capabilities. Underestimating or ignoring these potential threats is not in the best interest of the department, no matter the level of political contention. There remains a vital need to ascertain capability and intent of these phenomena for the benefit of the armed forces and the nation. For this reason, effective October 4th, 2017, I humbly submit my resignation in hopes it will encourage you to ask the hard questions. Who else knows? What are their capabilities? And why aren't we spending more time and effort on the issue? As I transition to a new chapter in my life, please know it has been an honor and privilege of a lifetime to serve with you. Rest assured, no matter where the path of life may lead me, I will always have the best interests of the department and the American people as my guiding principle. Luis Elizondo. I'm going to give you a clip from an interview in which Elizondo explains some of the serious hardships he's endured as a result of resigning as director of ATIP in the Pentagon.
Giuliano, I'll tell you, I risked everything to do this. I'm not sure people understand. I gave up a fantastic career. I was at the top of my game. I had tremendous respect in the building. And, I gave up a retirement, a pension, and everything to do this. A lot of people are willing to do this as a hobby. A lot of people are willing to do this as kind of a, if you will, as a side effort. But this was my job, and coming out like this was very, very uncomfortable. It was not easy. I can assure you, I gave up almost everything to do this because I believe in what I was doing, and I believe that the department must take this seriously, and there must be a way that allows our people, our folks, our patriots, our heroes to report this information up through the chain without being worried about any type of stigma or retribution.
And here, Elizondo explains some threats he received as a result of his resignation.
Since I've left, I've received 2 threats from people inside that building, which to me is almost unfathomable. I've had my security clearance threatened, and then I had someone call me and actually tell me maybe I should be threatened for my personal safety. Now, that's kind of seems crazy and a little bit ridiculous, I understand, but it nonetheless happened. And that's a problem for me. It's a problem because I'm trying to allow our country to have a conversation. And in the end, This is not under the fact that there are things we can't explain is not the providence of any government or any institution. It's just like Galileo making the point that the Earth was not the center of the solar system. That is not a classifiable fact. So my point being is if this is something that the American people think is important enough to make a national security priority, then they need to have the conversation and let them decide. In the end, I really don't care what the American people decide as long as they have the ability to make that decision themselves. But to keep that information from the American people and not even have the conversation, that is a problem.
Now, who are these powerful interests within the Pentagon who are so antagonistic to Luis Elizondo making AATIP in some of its findings public? Well, obviously, I can only go off what I've heard. From what I gather, there are two primary factions within the Pentagon that are antagonistic to the UAP reality becoming mainstream and accepted by science, mainstream media, and academia. The first faction are religious fundamentalists who view the study of anomalous craft and associated phenomena as opening a doorway to Satan. George Knapp recently tweeted the following: "The AATIP BAS study was sabotaged, then defunded in large part because the cabal of religious fundamentalists inside the national security apparatus believes UFOs and paranormal are satanic, and by studying them, we risk inviting Satan into our world." The second faction are those working in the Pentagon that are concerned that the UAP phenomenon going public puts them in legal hot water. Here's a quote from George Knapp from a Phenomenon radio interview from December 21st, 2017. "There are people inside government now who are freaking out about this, who are opposed to the release of the UAP information, not necessarily because they worry about the public going crazy, buying guns, and blowing up all social institutions. That might be a concern. But because they worry about their own culpability and the lies that they have told, about money that's been stashed into secret programs that should have gone to something else, about the taxpayers getting outraged." Here is what I would say to both factions and anyone else within the Pentagon, military, or intelligence community who are antagonistic toward the UAP subject going mainstream. Your duty is to serve the American people within the confines of the UFO subject. How can it possibly be said that you're serving the American people when just about every last damn person in this country would want official verification and more information on the reality of UAP flying around in our airspace and moving around in our oceans with impunity? I have to collect myself. Just like the Earth not being the center of the solar system is not a classifiable fact, so too, you simply cannot continue to classify a reality of our universe, and I pray to God that this is coming to an end, because Americans and indeed humanity at large needs to have a conversation about this very real reality. And I want to say something else. It's really rich. Of those select few within the Pentagon or intelligence agencies who are allegedly taking money that should have gone into something else, but instead funneling it into secret programs studying UAP. So let me get this straight. Not only are you illegally funneling taxpayer money to study the phenomena, but you're also ensuring with every last drop of your being that those taxpayers never know what you know about the universe. Say what? Now, it may come off as a contradiction that in one interview, Knapp conveys that not enough energy is being focused on studying the UAP phenomena, and consequently other world powers are taking the lead on this vital subject. And in another interview, he says that there are people in the Pentagon freaking out about the American people discovering their illegal activities, which includes stashing money into secret UAP programs that should have gone elsewhere. I personally don't assume a contradiction here. My interpretation from what Knapp has stated in these two separate interviews, based on what the insiders he knows have told him, is that while there are secret programs within the US government that are studying UAP, that doesn't mean it's being done in a way that optimizes understanding of UAP technology. I guess if you were hell-bent on keeping certain programs a secret when such secrecy is illegal, you'd be putting yourself in a position where you'd have to funnel money into your programs in a way that avoids detection, and you'd have to lie a lot as well. It seems to me that such deep levels of secrecy surrounding the UAP subject stifles progress and understanding it. Progress that perhaps other nations are beating the United States in. May I remind you that Luis Elizondo has stated to George Knapp that he was under the impression that Secretary Mattis was being insulated from ATIP. Perhaps that insulation is only the tip of a profoundly large iceberg on how this subject, UAP technology, is being handled within the military intelligence industrial complex. Now, I want to be clear. If we finally do learn that there was a lot of secrecy around the UAP subject and it was often handled in illegal ways, I'm not going to call for imprisonment of those involved. I mean, unless they hurt somebody over it. And I also want to be clear that I give my strongest support to all employees within the Pentagon and the military and intelligence apparatus. Without them, my security as a citizen of this country would be non-existent. That said, sometimes things need to get fixed, and I think the excessive secrecy behind the UAP subject does not serve the best interest of the American people nor the world community. It really is time to transition into a post-disclosure world. I think all my viewers agree with that sentiment. I think the vast majority of Americans agree with that sentiment. I also think that the vast majority of world citizens agree with that sentiment. The time is now. Hey, if you haven't seen my last video, how UFO disclosure will happen, all the details, give it a click and give it a watch. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.